everyone, here's our last video over day one for the lesson 6 notes. So notice in the last video we talked about how do we use completing the square to solve quadratic equations. Now when we did those examples, notice that our a value, or the number in front of our x squared, was 1. So that was for example 3 and for example 2. Now, let's look at this example 4 here. So example 4, we're now going to see where a does not equal 1. So that's not good. So let's talk about how do we do this, okay? Now, what we're going to do is we do actually need to make sure our a value is 1 in order to do completing the square. So what I'm going to look at is my 3 terms and see, do they have a number in common? Well, if I look at the numbers, we got 2x squared, 8x, and 14. Well, if I think 2, 8, and 4, they all have 2 in common. So here's what I'm going to do. I am actually going to divide every single term by 2 to make sure I get rid of that and to make sure my a value is now 1, so now I can use completing the square. So if your a is not 1, you're going to have to divide out by a number to get it to be 1, okay? So, of course, we do 2x squared divided by 2. That gives us x squared. And then 8x divided by 2 is 4x. And then 14 divided by 2 is a 7. And then 0 divided by 2, hopefully we know that's 0. Okay, now here, let's notice our number 7. Now, first of all, it's not even a perfect square. And if we think about numbers that multiply to 7, which are just 1 and 7, that will never combine to a 4. So as we did in the last 2 examples, I need to move my 7 over so I can do completing the square. So I'm going to have to do minus 7, and this allows me to create a perfect square trinomial. So I have negative 7 plus another number here. Okay, now, as we've done before, to get our c value, remember it has to be a perfect square, I'm going to use the formula b divided by 2 squared. Remember, b is always the number in front of x, so that's going to be 4 divided by 2. I'm going to square that. 2 squared is 4, so I'm going to add 4 to both sides. Now, if we think about numbers that multiply to 4, we got 1 and 4, 2 and 2. Hopefully we know 2 and 2. That will combine to our 4 here. Now I'm going to do x plus 2 on both of these because when we look at our middle term, it's a plus. These got to be pluses. So if you haven't noticed, whatever's that middle term, the sign, that has to be the sign on both of your factors. Now I go ahead and combine my negative 7 and my 4, so I do get negative 3. Now I'm going to rewrite my x plus 2 factors. Remember, they should always be the same. And so we write it as x plus 2 squared. Now we must get rid of the square, so we square root both sides. Now notice we are getting something with I because we're taking the square root of a negative. Now we know we have square root of negative 1. Let's think about the number 3. 3 is not a perfect square, and actually there's no perfect squares other than one that goes into it. So we just have square root of 3. There's nothing to really simplify it more than just using I. Now I'm left with x plus 2 equals, now let me go ahead and simplify this. So I have plus minus, we do the I. Remember, I should always be in front of the radical. Always, always, always. So make sure it's always in front. Now, to get x by itself, I need to subtract. Now when I do this, I do need to put the negative 2 in front of our plus minus because, remember, we need to write it in standard form. Remember, standard form is your a plus bi. So the real part comes first and then the imaginary part. So I'm going to have negative 2 plus minus I square root of 3. So make sure you always write it in that standard form so we are able to write it in the correct form. So once again, we still get 2 solutions. We get negative 2 plus I square root of 3 and negative 2 minus I square root of 3. Okay, let's look at our last example for this day 1 notes. Let's look at example 5. Okay, so here's what I'm going to have you guys do. I'm going to have you pause the video and try example 5 on your own. Okay, let's see what you did. So notice here our a is something other than 1. So we need to figure out what is the number that 3, 36, and 150 have in common. Well, they have 3. So I need to divide every single term, even on the right-hand side, by 3. So that allows me to get an a value of 1. And then I get x squared minus 12x plus 50 equals 0. Now we think about 50, it is not a perfect square, and if we really think about all the numbers that multiply to 50, so we got like 1 and 50, 2 and 25, 3, 4, 5, and 10, okay? Yeah, there's no numbers that if we add or subtract would give us 12, so we do need to move the 50 over so we can create a perfect square trinomials. Remember, that means that I need to have a perfect square, and that means my numbers, when I add them, will give me my middle term. So remember how we get this number, the c. We take our b, we divide it by 2, and we square it. So negative 12 divided by 2 squared, we get negative 6 squared, which gives us 36. So then we add that to both sides of the equations. Now, once I have done that, I get to factor, and once again, we know that 6 and 6 multiplies to 36, combines to our negative 12. And I need to make something. I just realized I made a mistake. This should be 6, not 12. Sorry, guys. So let me make these 6's. There we go. Now, notice that my middle term is a negative, so that means both of these have to be negative, okay? Now, when I combine negative 50 and 36, that goes ahead and gets me to that negative 14. Okay, so now I'm going to have to rewrite. Now, once again, I'm going to have to do some erasing here because I made some mistakes. I'm sorry about that, guys. Okay, so here, when we write this, remember it's going to be x minus 6 squared. Now, to get rid of that squared, we must square root both sides. Now, with 14, 14 is not a perfect square. There's no perfect squares that go into 14. So the only thing is we are going to have an I because we're taking the square root of a negative. Now, the square root and square cancel. We are left with, that should be minus 6. And then over here, I have I squared root of 14. Don't forget your plus minus because we will always have 2 solutions. Now, I'm going to add 6 to both sides. There we go. And once again, I need to do a little bit of erasing here. And when I do that, remember, make sure your 6 is in front of the plus minus because remember, we must write this in standard form where the real part's first and anything imaginary will come second. So our final answer is 6 plus minus I square root of 14. And remember, really this plus minus means we have 2 solutions. So 6 plus I square root of 14 and 6 minus I square root of 14. Okay, so that is the end of our day 1 notes. If you guys have any questions, please either email me or come in before or after school when I'm available, or come in during Tiger Time as well. Just let me know and I can sign you up. Okay, I'll see you guys later. Bye.